One last question before we begin to adjourn here today. Coming back to Mr. Kenny. Now, we hear from employers all the time that the labor market is tight and it is challenging for them to find workers. We have a workforce shortage in America. At the same time, the unemployment rate is currently at 3.6%. And refugees who are able to come to the United States help fill an important labor shortage gap in communities across the United States and in a number of important sectors of our economy. In fact, a 2017 study conducted by the Department of Health and Human Services found that refugees contributed $269 billion in revenue between 2005 and 2014. With a net fiscal impact of $63 billion, meaning that they generated more revenue for the United States than the amount spent on them by the government. I believe Senator Whitehouse referred to this data as well when he was present earlier. Sure wish we would have heard more about that study that was conducted in 2017, but regardless, the data is the data. Again, there's a chart demonstrating this behind me. Question for Mr. Kenny. In your experience leading one of the largest resettlement agencies in the United States, can you share your experience, how easy or difficult it is to assist refugees in finding employment, and what recommendations you may have to help us help you help refugees?
Historically, not difficult to help refugees find employment for a variety of reasons, largely because they come and they want to contribute and they want to work. The current program run by State Department and ORR puts a premium on refugees finding employment and puts a premium on the resettlement agencies. It's a primary goal to actually help them find employment. After some 90 days, about 32% of refugees are employed. After 8 months, our experience is that 80% of employable refugees are employed, and they are employed to the extent that they can not only provide for themselves, but be ineligible for public grants, such as TANF. So after 8 months, 80% of the refugees that we work with find employment. Various industries, agriculture, meatpacking, retail. I just, again, as I frequently do, had a Uber ride from a refugee. So the ability to help them find work is there. The one thing that I would say is we have to look for ways to follow them longer in their employability. In other words, not just get them their first job, but look at ways that we can help them develop their careers. So programs that can do that. And again, our refugee support tends to be a bit shorter than longer. Programs that can help them deal with English language, learn English for longer periods, and then develop their career over longer periods, I think would be beneficial to refugees and our communities.
Thank you so much. I'll have to follow up on that topic and many others, but I think at this point we'll begin to move towards adjournment of the hearing. But first, a couple of housekeeping items. Number one, you heard from a couple of my colleagues that yes, today is my birthday. Last year, 1 year ago today, it was day one, if I recall, of the confirmation hearing for now Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. And my sons at the time said, if you're not home for your birthday, Dad, you better have a good reason. I think we had a great reason last year. We have a very good reason here today. We'll wait for the weekend to blow out some candles. But thank you all for your participation. I do want to take this moment to enter a number of statements into the record, including statements from CHRLA, from Church World Service, from HIAS, from the International Refugee Assistance Project, from Kids in Need of Defense, Lawyers for Good Government, from Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, from Maryknoll Office for Global Concerns, from the National Immigration Forum, from the President's Alliance on Higher Education and Immigration, from Refugee Advocacy Lab, from Refugee Congress, from Refugees International, from Talent Beyond Boundaries, from the Episcopal Church, and from Voice for Refuge. Without objection, these statements will be included. Also, to announce to everybody, the record will close 1 week from today. I once again thank Ranking Member Cornyn and his staff, along with Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Graham, and their staff, as well as all of our fellow committee members for helping with the success of today's hearing. I thank again our witnesses for joining us today and for sharing your stories, your experience, and your expertise. What we heard today should be a hopeful reminder of the opportunity that the United States of America still represents to millions around the globe, but should also be an urgent call to action, because for all that our nation represents, we are at risk of falling short of our ideals and our needs. We can see that while the number of refugees worldwide is skyrocketing, our nation's admissions numbers have plummeted as a result of the policies of the prior administration, as well as due to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yet as we work to build back from COVID-19 and from the prior administration, the Biden administration is working hard to return to a standard fitting our nation. And there should be no reason why we can't find common ground and ensure the refugee program has the resources it needs to fulfill its mission. I also want to take a moment to emphasize a distinction that we discussed several times during today's hearing. There is a U.S. refugee admissions program, which was the focus of today's hearing. Separately, there's the asylum system. Now, both programs are life-saving programs, but they are separate and distinct, and both need our support to ensure that we can address the rise in displacement we are witnessing around the world, including for the 103 million who cannot safely return home. I do think it is important to underscore that refugees are one of the most thoroughly vetted groups of immigrants in the country. Another chart behind me to help drive home the point, just a small flavor of the many, many steps, rigorous steps that refugees go through before they can enter the United States. I'll also acknowledge that a former National Security Council senior director for the Trump administration for a year and a half put it this way, and I'll quote, "I did used to think that the refugee program was vulnerable to terrorist infiltration, but then I got here and made it my business to learn the facts about the program. And now I know that refugees are the most vetted category of any immigrant." End quote. She went on to say, again, I'll quote, "You'd be crazy to come if you were a terrorist. This is the last way you would try to get into this country." End quote. So this debate is not about security. As a country, we've taken painstaking steps to ensure refugees are thoroughly vetted before entry. Instead, this discussion is about our ability to live up to our founding ideals and to welcome those in need with humanity. We can and must do better. Better for people just like Mr. Sase, who have credible fear of persecution at home, but must still wait years in a refugee camp fighting for better living conditions before they can ever reach their new home. And we must do better for the many Americans who want to help in refugee resettlement efforts, who take their moral duty as Americans and as human beings seriously by trying to lift up and help refugees who dream of living free in the United States of America. I believe we can and must work together in a bipartisan way, as has been done in the past, to improve our immigration system so more people had the opportunity to utilize the refugee admissions process. I thank you all again for your participation today, to our witnesses, and to my colleagues for joining us. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.